I went to Washington to interview the chief economist of the World Bank, Nicholas Stern. I asked him to explain how almost 30% of World Bank loans to Indonesia had been lost or stolen.
We simply don't know what that number is.
Here's your own internal report, August 97. I quote, "We estimate that at least 20 to 30% of Government of Indonesia development budget funds are diverted through informal payments to government staff and politicians."
That number was plucked out of the air. Lots of times we have to guess with numbers, and the person who wrote that was guessing. Somebody comes up with a number and it gets recycled. But
a lot of money.
I don't want to dismiss the issue. Just let's not get hung up on one figure, which isn't a particularly hard.
Well, no,
figure.
but I mean, if it's a third of what the World Bank has put into one country,
no, then it's a serious question. When you have a loan, there's a lender and a borrower, and they share the responsibility in some way.
There's a strong case that has been made by people who've seen this evidence that the World Bank was duped by the Soeharto regime, claiming that poverty had dropped to 30 million, and in fact poverty was around about 60 million.
Let's talk about the harder figures. The income poverty figures are always the most difficult ones to get your hands on. But I think the illiteracy figures in the infant mortality figures are in this case probably more reliable. And there was some progress during that 30-year period, significant progress, I mean cutting illiteracy by half and so on. That's a very important step forward, so let's not lose sight of that.
In 97, the World Bank described the economy under Soeharto in a famous report as absolutely dynamic, doing everything right, terrific, brilliant. You know, by that time, the whole Asian thing had already started to collapse. It wasn't until the following year that the World Bank, for the first time in 30 years, had anything to say about a regime that is guilty of mass murder. Why was there such a silence that seemed to a lot of people simply to be complicity with this murderous dictatorship?
I think if we look back on our analysis of the economy and the politics at the time, we got a number of things wrong, and we have to understand that. We're going to get things wrong again. Not so many people called the Asian crisis before it happened. We failed along with
That's your job, though, isn't it? You're all economists with fantastic degrees and brilliant backgrounds, and how can you get it that wrong?
We're going to get it wrong some of the time. I think non-economists get it wrong a lot more often than economists. But this isn't a precise game, and there are going to be a number of occasions in the future where we get things wrong too.
So globalization creates debts, and debts creates misery, creates unemployment, creates the crisis, creates privatization, a lot of states' enterprise being privatized. So people will have to pay more to have an access for instance, like health, education. So it's not natural. Debts is not natural. It's designed.
So in effect, the money stolen by the Soeharto family is being repaid.
Yeah.
By
us, by the children.
Every day, more than $100 million is transferred in debt repayments from the poorest countries on earth to the richest. The poverty of families like this is paying off Indonesia's huge debt. The conditions of the IMF's latest loan include a reduction in subsidies on certain fuel and food. Half this man's monthly wage of less than £40 goes on medical treatment for his children who suffer from a serious blood disorder. As prices go up, he cannot even afford the special drugs that keep them alive.
Keadaan anak saya yaitu yang pertama dia menderita sakit. Jadi tiap bulan dia harus transfusi darah. Jadi kalau seandainya nggak transfusi darah, dia tiap akhir bulan itu pucat kayak sekarang contohnya. Bibirnya udah pada putih dua-duanya. Jadi akhir bulan itu mesti harus transfusi darah. Itu udah pasti. Pusingnya bukan kepalang. Ya kalau seandainya saya sakit gitu nggak bisa masuk kerja, ya udah apa boleh buat. Paling kita bisa cari pinjaman buat berobat anak gitu. Nanti setelah kita kerja lagi baru kita bayar gitu. Kita cicil.
Udah mandi kok masih.
Kalau seandainya gitu ya, barang-barang naik, sedangkan UMR gaji gitu naiknya nggak seberapa, ya kita otomatis ya kita serahin diri sama Tuhan aja deh. Yang jelas mungkin berobat pun kayaknya nggak bisa. Jadi kita pasrah apa adanya. Sebab gimana kalau kita paksain untuk
harusnya setiap pagi anak-anak kasih teh manis, sekarang enggak. Susu juga enggak.
Ya paling kita bisanya teriak sama pemerintah, ikut lewat FNPBI begitu. Kita tuntut pemerintah dengan supaya naikin UMR 100%.
Yang penting sekarang kan alhamdulillah bisa ketemu buat berobat. Biar walaupun kita makan pakai ikan asin, tapi udah alhamdulillah.
In the global economy, one American corporation dominates the world trade in food grains, while almost half the world's population, like this family, attempt to live on less than $2 a day.
What do you say to those 17 million people who call for a complete, and I repeat, complete cancellation of debt as the only way to lift the huge number of poor people in the world out of poverty?
I'd say two things. First, what will lift people out of poverty is not cancelling their debt, but what policies their countries pursue, whether they educate poor people, whether they give them health. And so the question, and then what sort of economies they try to run. Do they integrate them into the world economy, or do they run corrupt economies? Those are the primary determinants of how well countries will do. That is the answer to what determines whether people get out of poverty. It can be done. It has been done. Should we cancel the debt? Canceling debt is one way of giving resources to poor countries. Mm-hmm. What I'd like to see is a much greater flow of resources to poor countries. I'd like to see the markets of the industrialized countries opened so that these countries where people are poor and can produce agriculture are able to export. That's what will get them out of poverty. The statement debt relief is the only thing that will get them out of poverty is wrong. It would help, provided it is accompanied by a whole set of other measures.
But surely debt, even in one's own life, and especially a poor person's life, is the greatest cause of real poverty.
No.
And when you have a country devoting half its budget to paying off a debt, when you have the poorest countries in the world sending out millions of dollars into the rich world, surely as a priority, that debt has to be either relieved substantially or go altogether. Doesn't that make it just seems common sense to me? If I got that wrong?
Yeah, you've got it wrong.
Oh,
let me explain.
okay.
First of all, you are indebted and I am indebted. And I would not be better off if I was somebody to come and cancel my debt, because I'd never be able to borrow again. And debt is a normal way of borrowing in order to do things, purchase goods, invest, when you don't have the resources, and they'll generate an income and you'll repay. So the notion that all debt should be cancelled is a bad one. Financial systems operate on the basis of debt that is paid.
The Human Rights Commission of the United Nations, in a very comprehensive report, said, and I quote, "The institutions of globalization have yet to seriously address the issue of human rights in a democratic fashion. Globalization has caused global conditions of inequality and discrimination." What's your response to that?